Hey everybody. So, one thing I actually do get asked as an author fairly frequently is where do you get your ideas from? How do you start something? Because even before I ever got anything published, I always thought of myself as a writer. I was always working on ideas and stories. And one thing I would find when I talk to people is everybody's got an idea. Not all of them are good, but everybody's got an idea for a story that they want to tell. And a lot of people have trouble getting started. So I thought I'd share two pieces of advice that might help you if this is something you're struggling with. Now, neither one of these are how to build a world, but it is helpful in figuring out how to tell a story. If you've got a rough idea in your head, like, this is the world I want, these are the characters, but what do I do next? This might help. World building might be another vlog another time. But the first is a very common piece of advice. You'll hear writers bandied around all the time. The second is kind of something I've come up with, although I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with it. The first piece, the common advice, is this the most interesting time in your characters' lives? And if not, why not? The idea is you need to look at your story as a whole. Now, when I say the most interesting time, I don't mean the opening scene of the story. Whether your story is 1 book, 10 books, a novella, whatever, you don't have to start at the most interesting part. But it doesn't need to be. But for this expression, we're considering the most interesting part occurring during your story. And it's not an absolute. It doesn't say that this story has to be the most interesting that ever occurred to these characters, because maybe there's some benefit to one of your characters who all of his interesting stuff happened earlier in life, and now he's later in life, a world-weary hero joining these younger, it just says to consider. Is this the most interesting time in these characters' lives? And if it isn't, why are you doing it that way? Because, for the most part, the most interesting part of their lives is going to be the most interesting story for your readers. So that's something to consider. You may cause you to shift the narrative, because you may be thinking of a story where all of these grand adventures happened in the past and now the world is settled and these are the stories. Maybe those grand adventures in the past might be the better story, might be more compelling. The other thing I wanted to share is what I have termed the except for that one time rule, which I think is really helpful in terms of coming up with a narrative, in terms of focusing a story. Basically, you can conceive almost any interesting story by taking any of the rules you have for your world. Guns no longer work. Everybody can only have one magical talent. There were never twins born in this world. Nobody knew how the ancient machinery worked. And then you add, except for that one time. You allow one exception to any rule you lay down about your world, your setting, your narrative, and that's a story unto itself. Instantly interesting. Because you say, these are the rules. Except this guy. Except this girl. And from there, you automatically have a story. Because you have a character who stands out from the rest of the world you've created, who is different, which already instantly creates conflict, starts to build a narrative, the troubles they're going to have along the way, the obstacles to overcome. It's very helpful in coming up with the idea for a story. So those are the two things I wanted to offer as a way to help you try and figure out what story you might want to tell. Is this the most interesting time in your characters' lives? And if not, why not? And then consider, except for that one time. I know the examples I gave for except for that one time weren't great, but I was pulling them out of the top of my head. But you get the point. Anyway, so that's it. Just a little writerly advice. I'll see you guys around.